Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on Microsoft Teams presented by the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. Today is August 14th, 2024. I'm going to ask that you please stay quiet or muted if possible. We are recording this session, so eliminating any distractions would be very helpful. Our presenter today is Richard Marion, and so Richard, thank you for joining us today, and I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. And before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge the land from which I currently inhabit, and so I'm proud to be joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam and Squamish and Kwantlen First Nations, otherwise known as the City of Richmond or Lulu Island. And I'm grateful to have the privilege of being here, and I respect the work that they've done in looking after this land for time immemorial. Okay, so to get started, we are talking about Microsoft Teams today. So Microsoft Teams, for those that don't know, is basically Microsoft's version of Zoom, and so Microsoft Teams allows us to collaborate together in various places. And there are a number of organizations that still use Microsoft Teams to do meetings, chats. It also allows for file sharing, and it integrates with Outlook and Calendar as well too. So it basically is. It's a working tool for cooperating together. Most of us have probably had experience, if we've had experience with it, have used it for meetings. And so as a meeting platform, traditionally it had been less accessible than Zoom. It may still be less accessible because it has a number of keyboard shortcuts as well, but it also uses different keyboard shortcuts than Zoom. So let me first talk about what I use Teams for. So I mainly use Teams for meetings when I have to actually meet with people and organizations that use Teams in that method. So a lot of times I will just click a link that's been sent to me in a meeting invitation, whether it's a calendar invite or an email. Then you can just join the meeting. So I'm going to bring up Teams here on the screen.
Zoom Workplace, Zoom Meeting, Chat Richard Marion, you,
Okay.
Microsoft Teams.
So I'm currently, it's showing that I'm in the chat window for Microsoft Teams. So that's usually what will happen is when you first open Teams, it'll open up various windows. So there's an apps bar that shows the apps that are active with your account for Teams. And then in the apps bar, there's calendar, chat, file sharing, and there's some other ones depending on the Teams account you're using. If you're using a personal Teams account, the apps tab is limited to whatever apps are available in your Office 365 account. So it's most likely going to be the chat function of Teams, the calendar, possibly your mail, and your file sharing option, which actually integrates with your OneDrive. So the best way to get around Teams, especially with, I'm assuming we're all using screen readers here. So the best way to get around Teams is actually with the keyboard shortcuts. And so there's one keyboard shortcut I'm gonna do right now that is very useful because it brings up the entire list of keyboard shortcuts in Teams. So that keyboard shortcut is Alt period. So if you do that, actually it is Control period. Sorry.
Breadcrumb dialog, document, chats list heading, chats list button expanded heading level 2, breadcrumb, heading level 2 button expand.
So as you can hear, there's it's contextual. So since my chats list is open, it's brought me to the list of chat shortcuts. But if I wanted to go up to the entire list of shortcuts, I would
button close. Breadcrumb navigation landmark list with 2.
So I would just go through the breadcrumb.
Link keyboard shortcuts.
So you hear there's a link for keyboard shortcuts.
General heading level 2.
And you get the list heading level. So all the various keyboard shortcuts are marked by headings. So for example, under general, for example,
Robert Ponto has joined the meeting alert.
So under general, for example, you'll hear
table with 14 rows and 2 columns, row 1 column 1 action, column 2 keys, row 2 action, column 1 show keyboard shortcuts.
So that's the one that we're just doing.
Keys, column 2 control plus dot,
okay,
period.
So that's control period.
Row 3 action, column 1 go to search. Keys, column 2
so that's your general ones, and then if you wanted to more specific for other meeting types, you can just jump down to the next heading, which was the next heading,
navigation heading level 2.
So same thing with then you get the navigation keyboard shortcuts,
messaging heading level 2,
and then there's ones for the messaging app, and there's like for example, to create a new message chat, it's control N, and as well.
Betty Nobel has joined the meeting alert.
So when you do that,
meetings, calls and calendar heading level 2.
So here's your meetings, calls, and calendars. So this is probably the most important because it really is the most commonly used feature for those of us that aren't working in an organization that uses Teams on a regular basis. So so you'll go into, so here's some of the things that you would need to know specifically on the meetings and calls.
Table with 29 rows and 2 columns, row 1 column 1 action.
So there's a lot of things here. There's 29 different keyboard shortcuts that can be used during meetings and calls.
Column 2 keys, row 2 action, column 1 accept audio call. Keys, column 2 control plus shift plus S.
Okay, so that's to so if someone calls you in Teams, because Teams it can also be used for audio chats and video chats. So if you get an audio call, it'll tell you your screen reader will say if you're in Teams that you're receiving an audio call, so that you can do that particular keyboard shortcut for accepting audio calls, like
keys, column 2 control plus shift plus S.
So you get your control shift S.
Row 3 action, column 1 join from meeting started toast. Keys, column 2 control plus shift plus J.
Okay, so that was if you want to join the meeting that you've started as a host, and you do that particular one. That's not quite as commonly used, like especially if you're just joining a meeting from an email link as well too. That would be more for someone that's actually setting up meetings too.
Row 4 action, column 1 open meeting chat.
Okay, so this is open in meeting chat.
Keys, column 2 control plus shift plus R.
So control shift R will open your in meeting chat, and so on. To hang up in meetings, it's Alt H. To mute and unmute your audio, it's Alt A, and then to mute and unmute your show and hide your videos, it's Alt O for. I'm not sure why it's O. So whereas Zoom, it's a V, or is it Alt? I might be getting mixed up here.
Row 5 action, column 1 start video call. Keys, column 2 control plus shift plus U. Row 6 action, column 1 toggle background blur. Keys, column 2 control plus shift plus P.
Okay, just actually, I'm probably wrong here. So all the Zoom Teams commands appear to be control shift and the letters for the most part. So so that's that. Maybe I'll take some questions, because otherwise we're going to probably go down quite a way far down into the list of keyboard commands. So if anyone has any questions, just unmute and just ask your question. There's not that many of us here.
Richard, it's Ruth here.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So when I'm using Zoom, sometimes I use the shortcut keys and sometimes I tab around. Is that option available to me with MS Teams as well?
Yes, it is. So let me get out of this document where I am, and I'll show you, and I'll go back to the main screen here, which in my case, it's opened up to a chat screen.
Clickable button.
Because I don't actually have a meeting in progress right now. So So now I'm back at the chat screen. So if I wanted to just tab around, I can tab through the screen. So it would be
apps navigation landmark clickable calendar toggle button not pressed.
So this is the apps nav area that I was mentioning earlier. So so here's the apps that are available to me. So and it actually told me the calendar's not pressed. So
clickable toggle button pressed chat.
So my chat is pressed because that's where Teams usually will open up to as a default if you're running it from your computer.
Clickable toggle button not pressed community.
And this is the community section. So that's more is I think I've never used it, but when I was working in a workplace that had Teams, that was kind of the general area where people would post general announcements. It wasn't really specific personal chats or meeting chats. It was kind of more like a general sort of community area, general announcements area type that can be used. And I believe it's not something that I used very frequently in Teams because it was, at the time, was probably the least accessible area of Teams as well.
Clickable toggle button not pressed activity.
And this is the activity. So this showed basically, if you click that, it would show all your meeting start and end times and various things that you may have done on Teams. Like if you shared a file with Ryan, for example, that would show up there. That things that is basically a log of everything you've done.
Button collapsed your profile. Apps navigation land clickable toggle button not chats region clickable button.
Okay, so
Control plus Shift plus F.
Okay,
filter.
So this is the so that I was just using the arrow keys to get through that. So if I was to tab again, it actually, I noticed when I put the arrow key, it put me into the chats region and put me at the filter area. The other thing you'll notice with Teams is if you're on a keyboard shortcut, especially with the latest version of Teams, on a button that has an associated keyboard shortcut, if your screen reader's reading your tips to you, it'll give you the keyboard shortcut for that particular function as well too.
Meet now button.
This is the Meet Now button. That's if I wanted to actually create an instant meeting, I would push that, and it might turn the chat that Ryan and I are having into an actual meeting between the two of us. Or since I'm chatting with no one, it would just basically open up a new meeting thing, and then I have the option of sharing the link with other people.
New chat button. Control plus N.
So here's, see, as you notice, it's a new chat button, and then it said Control N.
Invite to Teams button.
And then that's if you want to share Teams invite with people.
Clickable change group chat avatar but chat participants list with one tab control. Chat tab selected 1 of 4.
Okay, so this is the tab controls, and it turned on NVDA's focus mode in this case. So these tabs can be manipulated as well too. So that's the tabs that are available to me in Teams.
Clickable link Android phone button. Type a message, edit multi-line, type a message.
Yeah, so you definitely can tab through the various functions on the screen. The other thing that works in Teams as well too is the F6 key, and that'll jump you between the panels as well too.
Search landmark. Look for people, messages, files.
So that jumps you between the various frames on Teams as well too. Teams, because it's it's sort of a web-based app, even though there's a desktop version, looks very much like a website that if you've ever joined a meeting and you didn't have Teams and you clicked on the link and it just opened up your Edge browser or Chrome browser and launched Teams, the Teams app on the computer looks much like that. And because it's all part of Microsoft's goal to make the Office 365 desktop apps look as much like their web-based components as possible as well. So what you would find is that there are things in the Team desktop app that basically simulate a web page, like in the case of pulling up that list of keyboard commands, it had the breadcrumb, for example.
Richard, could you remind me how you brought up that list of shortcut keys?
So the shortcut keys is control. Let me just try to
breadcrumb dial.
Yeah, control period.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that has all the shortcut keys. So I may have said Alt and letters a few times. You may have to experiment because there are some situations where the Alt key does work in Teams that you get used to it, but they may be in the process of changing some of these keyboard shortcuts. So that if you only remember one thing, remember Control period, because it brings up every associated keyboard shortcuts to do with Teams. And to keep in mind, it's contextual, so it'll bring up the shortcuts specifically for the section of Teams you're in first, and you'll have to go back up through the breadcrumb to the main list of keyboard shortcuts.
I just want to quickly mention as well that if you're using JAWS, you can also do Insert W and Insert H as well, which will bring up some hotkeys
as well.
Right. Is the screen sharing function more accessible in Teams than it is in Zoom?
Probably not. I've only used it once and never could figure out how to share my sound. But I know there is a way to do it because I was at a meeting last week with CNIB Access Labs, and they were trying to they had issue, and it was a sighted person trying to share their audio and video, and they had issues with sharing the audio as well too. So sharing audio on Teams might be more of a challenge than it is on Zoom. But the screen sharing setup is basically the same. You use the keyboard shortcut to start your screen share, and then you try to establish all the settings. And the audio is the part that probably is the most problematic with Teams. I was sure I checked the box that said share audio when I was trying to do it when I was showing someone something that wanted to meet on Teams. And all they got was the video. They couldn't hear the audio, and I ended up having to hold my the device to the microphone to actually so they could hear the audio as well too.
One of the other things I quickly want to mention is that Freedom Scientific has on-demand webinars on using Microsoft Teams, which might be very useful because Microsoft has more than one version of Microsoft Teams. There's at least 3. There's the web app, there's the desktop version, there's the web store app, and your mileage will vary. So I would highly recommend taking a listen to that, but I believe their recommendation was for us to be using the desktop version of Teams.
Because I've used the one on my iPhone as well.
Right.
Yeah, and that the iPhone version of Teams is actually quite accessible. It kind of like the iPhone version of Outlook being better than the desktop version of Outlook as well too. So I've never I have it on my phone. I've never started a meeting with it, but I've actually participated in a meeting with it. But it worked quite well. Like it was all the button controls were labeled, and it seemed to work quite well. The version that I launched today is the one it seems to be on my computer. So I'm not sure if it's the App Store. It probably is the App Store version instead of the desktop version. It's getting harder to find a desktop version that'll stick. I noticed the other day Microsoft graciously changed my Teams Classic on my Mac to the current version of Teams that's available without my permission. So because they were supposed to get rid of one version of Teams by the end of 2024, and they're slowly sort of updating people to the most current version of Teams, whether you want to be or not. So there's a good chance that when you type Teams into your start menu, if you had a desktop version, it may have actually put you back to the App Store to the personal version, because there's along with the 3 different versions that Ryan was talking about, one of the versions only works with school and work accounts, and so you get more limited when you're trying to basically use your personal Microsoft account on Teams as well too. So if you have a work or school account, then you definitely have access to the full desktop app as well too. But for those of us that strictly only have personal accounts, we probably are only limited to the website and the App Store version.
So, Richard, sorry, Betty, go ahead.
Well, no, it's okay. Why don't you go first? I was just going to ask because I'll go ahead. When I load Teams now, it keeps telling me that my version isn't up to date, and I just keep hitting remind me later. and then it seems to work fine.
So eventually it's going to just replace it for you. That's what Microsoft is saying. So eventually it's just going to, all of a sudden it's just going to say, you are now on the new Teams experience. You can try the new one and go back to your previous version sometimes. But I like if what you have is still currently working, just keep using it until Microsoft basically takes it away. Which last week I was trying to, it was getting ready for this, and then I decided, okay, I'll just do it on Windows instead. I had opened my Teams Classic on my Mac, and then next thing I know, it says I got this dialog that says Microsoft is currently updating your Teams. I thought it was just and it was actually updating Teams to the new version that actually looks more like their website and apps Windows App Store version. But the desktop version kind of looks similar now too. Like, as I said, Microsoft is kind of in the process of making everything look the same. So and as they introduce more of the keyboard shortcuts to the App Store and website version, it might be less of an issue, but it is still definitely an issue, especially for those of us that have been forced to update to the new Outlook have seen as well too.
So, Richard, do you know if you can download a list of the shortcuts rather than, and not because they're hard to navigate, but then it's easier to skim them when you're looking for something?
Yeah, if you go, I can. What I'll do is after this meeting is I'll send Ryan a link, and he can include it in the. I was going to say in the show notes. It sounds like we're on a podcast. He can maybe include it in the follow-up email. There, if on the Office 365 helps pages, there's that list actually exists as an actual website as well too. So
the other thing you could do, Diana, is if you're using JAWS and you do insert W, that puts all that into the virtual viewer, so you can just select all, copy and paste.
Right, and that's what I'm using, and I'm going to do some teaching for the school board, and they use Teams because they say it's more secure now than Zoom. I'd prefer Zoom, but if that's what they use, I'm going to have to use it, which is why I was looking for the shortcut keys. But
yeah,
I'll
so
do
Teams,
the
so government and corporations still say Teams is more secure, partly because, especially if they have a requirement that all the data stays in Canada, Teams does guarantee that, where Zoom doesn't. So it can't because Microsoft can, with its corporate clients, basically guarantee that their data will stay on Canadian servers. So that's why large corporations still use probably Teams over Zoom or WebEx over Zoom as well too.
We have a meeting with our bank and they're still using WebEx.
Yeah. Our same with us. We have a meeting with our bank and they use WebEx, but the WebEx, now getting a little sidetracked, but the WebEx iPhone app, it actually is fairly usable and almost accessible. So that's what we end up using was the mobile version of it.
Yeah, our bank too.
It's Pat. I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm assuming that the same problem exists where if you have two computers in the same room or something like that and they're both on Teams, that they'll you'll get feedback and that kind of thing like it does on Zoom, right?
I would assume yes. So if that's the case, mute the audio on one of the computers, and if you're two people in a room, it's probably best to wear a headset, or at least one of you should wear a headset. But that would be my suggestion. Assume that is the case because it's picking up the audio from the mic, and then of course it gives feed back and forth to the point where it's creating distortion.
So then my next question is, I'm not using a headset right now. I'm using a Yeti Blue, which I have the JAWS plugged into the sound card of the Yeti Blue. And so my question is, how is this microphone for working on Teams or Zoom or whatever?
It sounds good. Like, and we can't hear your jaws at all. We haven't.
No, you won't.
Yeah,
because I have it turned down. I just didn't know how. I used to be in broadcasting, so I want things to sound extra good.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that's why I'm asking, does it sound extra good?
It's very clear.
It's very
Yes,
clear.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And is it louder than anybody else's level?
It's louder than Ryan's for sure.
Okay, his is low. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems about the same as the other levels.
Does it? Okay.
From my perspective.
Yeah,
Okay.
like you sound basically the same as Betty, Diane, and Ruth, and
Yeah.
Ryan. Like Ryan is has the lowest audio level.
Right.
out of all of
Right.
us, I think.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I really appreciate that.
And Teams will do like Zoom as well too. Like unless you turn it off in your audio settings. So if you go into your Teams setting, you have audio controls like Zoom as
Right.
well too. And when you go into your audio setting, you can turn off things like the automatic volume adjustments for your microphone and things like that. Just like you can in Zoom, you can turn all that off as
I've
well.
never seen that in Zoom. It's
under the advanced settings. You can turn that off under the audio.
I've never
advanced
looked at
settings.
the advanced settings. I'm not super good technologically,
Yeah,
so whatever. But yeah, that's good to know too.
So Zoom and Team will if it doesn't, like, it'll adjust it based on like if it's not hearing it tries to adjust your microphone level automatically, but it doesn't do that great of a job with it. Like
Right.
in Zoom, for example, if you turn it to put it into musicians mode, it turns all those automatic settings off because that's not the ideal situation for
Right.
recording the music or whatever. So Teams has an advanced settings section as well too that does that. And Teams, because it's more closely integrated with Windows, if it's not there, it would like you can adjust it under your computer audio settings as well. So
Okay. I think that's the only question I had. Thanks.
what else? So I think that's really that's basically about it. So one thing about booking meetings in Teams. So if you're using Outlook, if you've got if it's one of the when you're booking meetings in Outlook, for example, if you want to create an actual virtual meeting link, you can do that, and it would create one of the options is to create a Teams meeting, and it would create the meeting on Teams, and then add it to the calendar invites for people. So if you're wanting to do a meeting on Teams, you can schedule it in your Outlook calendar, invite people to it, and they'll receive it on Teams. And then when the meeting is created in Outlook, it creates it in the Teams calendar as well too, because they do integrate. So if you're signed into the same Microsoft account in both, it'll create the calendar the link in both, vice versa as well. So if you actually go into your Teams calendar, create a meeting, it'll populate all the information into your Outlook calendar as well too. So that integration is quite seamless. Whereas with Zoom, you have to actually install the Outlook calendar plugin in Zoom for that to work with Zoom.
Yeah, the integration is really nice because, like you said, you can have Outlook, OneDrive, Teams, access all from one interface.
Yeah, and once you get it, and actually, in my opinion, it's probably a less complicated interface than trying to do all those things in Outlook as well too. But you can do that as well. So, and that's great if you're in a situation like Diana, with your work at the school board, you'll be in a situation where they're probably going to be using SharePoint and all that. So like if people are sharing files within a meeting or whatever, those automatically would show up within your SharePoint directories as well too.
Yeah, that's good information. Yeah, they haven't given me the account yet, but I think that's about to happen. So, yeah. I mean, the email account, because I think I have to be connected through their system, ideally. But
yeah, and that's where we get into as I was saying earlier about the Teams for work and school, and actually what happens now with Teams if you go into the add account thing, if it adds a worker, it switches the interface to the worker school interface, which then shows all the names. So like, let's say you've got a Calgary School Board email address, it would show you all the people that are in your specific team, for example, on Teams, and you would have access to the company directory through Teams, through that, as long as you're logged into that worker school account on your mobile device or on your desktop.
So would that change for your own personal one as well, once it's changed for the work or school, or would you end up having two?
You'd end up having two accounts on the same. So let's right now, like if I'm gonna, let me just go to that section of Teams.
Clickable link and type of actions for new message, video, send tool, chat Richard Marion, headings and more menu button sub menu Y. Your profile, status available button collapse.
So that's my profile button. So like if I open that,
available, change status sub menu 1 of 5.
Status thing. So.
Set status message 2, change profile photo, view your menu item my Microsoft, menu item sign out from, view your edit name, my Microsoft, sign out from, available, change, set status message, change profile photo 3 of 5.
I thought it was going to tell me where in the heck is the...
Set status, available, sign out, my Microsoft, edit name.
Okay, earlier I saw on an option to add another Microsoft account, but it does there. So what'll end up happening is on your home computer, it may show your personal and your work account. So you have to make sure that to access your work functions, that your work account is selected in that list of accounts. That would be there if I had a work account on this machine.
Right. But you only have to do it within Teams. You don't have to sign out of your whole Office system, right?
You shouldn't have to sign out of your whole Office, but I'm
not getting any other buttons on my screen.
Yeah. My understanding is you should, well, I'm assuming you're going to get a computer from the Calgary School Board that'll have all that. But if you're not,
I don't think so, because it's only a contract position.
Yeah. So then you shouldn't have to sign out of your Office, but in order to use some of it, you might have to actually log into their Office account to access their SharePoint, for example.
Right.
Yeah. But you shouldn't have to sign out. You shouldn't have to create another Windows account on your computer. If anything, you might only be able to have to create a separate Teams or Office 365 login for your work account.
Right.
Which they would probably set up for you.
Anyhow, yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. Getting rid of
kind of got off topic, but
yeah, well, getting rid of work accounts on Teams is another bit of an issue too, because when you sign out of them, it's sometimes they actually don't disappear from the list of accounts, even though it's ineligible to log in. And someone at Microsoft told me, because I was doing a Teams test for someone, and it had a test account, and the only way I was able to get rid of it was actually go in and edit the registry for edit for Teams. So anyhow, hopefully you don't have to do that. But
I hope not. Yeah. I don't like going into the registry. I think I did it once.
Betty, I heard you say something, you didn't have buttons on your screen?
Yeah, no, it's okay. I just discovered I was in the Zoom app instead of the call with Zoom part, and I couldn't mute, and I figured it out. So sorry about that.
Okay.
I forgot you guys could hear me say that.
Because I actually thought you had launched Teams and you were playing around with it.
Yes.
No.
Maybe that'll be our next session. We'll do everybody join Teams, and we'll just do an exploration of the app.
The other thing, Ryan, that I would really like at a session is OneDrive. I'm not that great at using OneDrive, and I know if someone shares a folder with you, you can add shortcuts to your own OneDrive, and I've done it a couple of times. It's kind of a bit fiddly. And also I've found when I've shared OneDrive files and then I try to save them, I get this caret character or whatever in. Anyway, I would very much like to learn more about OneDrive. I don't know about
Okay.
anybody else.
Okay.
Sure. Why not?
Now Ryan's got to find someone that knows enough about OneDrive to actually teach it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
may just bring Freedom Scientific back on.
Yeah, that they did a good session the other time they
Yeah,
came.
and Ryan brought up a good point. Like Freedom Scientific has a lot of excellent sort of webinars and things about Microsoft Teams and the Office products. Like I don't know if I'd used it a few years ago, so I'm assuming they've updated those webinar materials now because it's would be out of date a bit now for Teams. Like if they still have the one that was sort of posted on their website back in 2001, so. It would be slightly out of date, but it's a good starting point if you've never used it before.
I think they just did a recent one, like within the last few months on
I think
Teams.
so. Yeah.
But I didn't see it at the time, partly because I didn't need it. But the other thing was I think I was busy or whatever reason. But I know it'll still be there if I go.
Yeah, because when I had used those materials, those and for anyone that's using just NVD, it's still useful to have because a lot of the team keyboard shortcuts aren't JAWS specific. So even if you're using NVDA as your primary screen reader, I found the webinars quite useful myself that they had posted a few years ago anyhow.
Did you, Richard, this is Ruth, did you say that Microsoft Teams is only available in Canada?
No, so what ends up happening is Microsoft Teams is available anywhere in the world. But what happens with government and corporate clients that have sort of data security concerns is Microsoft can guarantee with them that their cloud storage services that team utilizes would only access the Microsoft Canadian servers as opposed to the US or other international based servers, whereas Zoom may or may not be able to do that. I'm not at this point. So that's why governments and some other sort of agencies insist on using Teams or WebEx because they can guarantee maybe a higher level of security than Zoom may or may not be able to provide. Now, having said that, I don't think it's been a long time since you hear about Zoom bombings, but maybe they still happen. But
I forgot about. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think if you log into the zoom.us website, if you actually have an account, there is a place I believe I've seen that you can tell it where you want your data stored. So I think you can actually choose your region.
It's getting better because Zoom is basically nowadays targeting sort of more enterprise type clients even as well too, because Zoom has changed its name even on your desktop. It says Zoom Workplace now. So I think they're probably more able to compete with Teams or WebEx and that for even maybe on the data security side. But Teams is not Teams is not as scary as it used to be. Like when people first started talking about Microsoft Teams, it didn't work at all with any screen reader, like it at all. It's not like if I personally get a meeting link for Teams, it's not the screen reader that really is the issue. It's whether I can actually launch Teams properly from the link, because sometimes it doesn't know what version of Teams to open up the link in, and things do happen. So if you are participating in a meeting with Teams, if you used to only give yourself a couple minutes for Zoom, give yourself at least 10 minutes or more prior to the start of the meeting, because it may take a while for your computer to figure out how to load the meeting and as well too. So that's been my experience with it, both on Windows and the Mac as well too. So if you're using Teams on Apple, it is definitely problematic. That's where I probably would say to someone, if you got access to a PC, maybe or mobile, maybe join your Teams meeting from your mobile device or your PC.
Or just call a friend and say, let's practice doing some team meetings.
Yeah. The other thing too, I noticed with Teams is if you do have a free account, they offer, the other day I just noticed that they offer up to 1 hour meetings for unlimited, with up to 100 participants for free, as well. I think Zoom is 40 minutes. So, and then you can meet for free with up to 2 other participants, I think it was. So, it's, kind of like Zoom. If you've got a smaller group of people, you can have an unlimited length of meeting. But if you're a larger group, you can still meet in I believe it said an hour as well too. So even if Ryan, if there's enough people interested in wanting to sort of try Teams out, ABC wouldn't even have to have a meeting account. We could create a meeting link and try it for half an hour or so.
I'd be interested in trying that.
All right, I'm writing that down.
I think we're all used to Zoom, so we kind of gravitate to it. But it's kind of nice to be able to use other things in case we're thrown into them or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Like, every once in a while you get thrown off and you get asked to participate in a Teams meeting. Like, I don't know if anyone here does work for CNIB Access Lab. They insist on using Teams. So any of the people that do their testing work with them is basically you end up using Teams whether you want to or not. For some reason they use Teams for Access Lab, but Zoom for all their online programs. So it's kind of interesting why Access Labs chose Teams over Zoom.
Well,
so that's about all I have. Yeah, so that's about all I have. So I'll send Ryan the link to a direct URL link to that web page of keyboard commands, and then you can send it out to people as well.
That would be excellent. All right. Well, Richard, I thank you for your time today and sharing your knowledge of Microsoft Teams with us. I want to thank our participants for coming out as well. And
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.